Hey everybody, there's David. Hi David. Hey Justin. David and David.
Hello.
Susan, hello. Hi Jess. Hey Bill.
Hi.
Carlos, hello.
Hi.
Stacy and Marcos. Welcome everybody. Nice to see you all again. There's Terry. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you.
Let's give it one more minute for folks to join, and then we'll get started. Actually, I know that we have a jam-packed agenda today, so in the interest of time, I'm going to jump in. And the first stuff is the intro material anyway. So hey everybody, thanks for joining us again today to talk about VTA's BART Silicon Valley project. A reminder that we're recording today's meeting. I'm Doug Moody, standing in again today as facilitator while we continue to work to identify the right long-term facilitator for the CWGs. And Bernice is going to have more to share about that during her presentation. So today for the agenda, but before, the first thing we have on the agenda after this intro is Erica has some information to share with you about the role of the BSV External Affairs team. Right before that, I have some follow-up information to share in response to the discussion we had at the last meeting about interchange improvements near this station. And then following, the introduction where I have that response to that conversation, then Bernice is going to provide an update after Erica's presentation on the overall BSV Phase 2 project. And during this part of the presentation, I'll also have some information to share with you about the direction the project is going regarding design of the 20th Street Little Portugal station. Then after the Phase 2 update that Bernice and I will give, Ron Gollum will be here to provide an update of VTA's current real estate and acquisition efforts. Then following Ron, we have Christina Gotuaco and Roy Mann with VTA's TOD team, Transit Oriented Development Group. And they have some information to share about the ongoing planning efforts in the 20th Street Little Portugal station, which is also the Five Wounds Urban Village area. And the efforts for that are just kicking off. Then following that, we have Adriano with us. Adriano will be joining us to provide an update of the station refinement effort for the downtown and Diridon stations. And then following Adriano's presentation, Eric and Kristen are going to provide an update on BSV outreach and engagement efforts. This part of the meeting also includes an interactive survey component using a different platform. So if you have like a smartphone or second screen available, recommend having that available to streamline the process during that part of the meeting. Then we will have space for CWG member report outs at the end of the meeting. And a reminder that the CWG member report outs is your opportunity to share with the group how you've been sharing information about the BSV2 project and what you've been hearing from your communities. So we can help deliver this project together. Then to close the meeting out, we have some info for you about the next round of CWGs in February. And then I was confirmed Adriano will be joining us. He'll just be a little bit late today, so he definitely will be here for the update of the station refinements effort for the Diridon and downtown stations. Next slide, please. So before we get into the presentation part of the meeting, I want to create some space for the CWG members to introduce themselves, say hello to the group, just by stating your name and the organization or the community you represent. Let's start with your chair, David, and then after that, I'll go on down the list. David, would you like to say hello to the group?
Hello, everyone. David Vieira from the Five Wounds Portuguese National Church.
Thank you, David. Hello. And Bill? Bill, if you're speaking, you're muted.
Hi, Bill Rankin with Friends of Five Wounds Trail.
Thank you very much. I believe Carlos is going to join us today. He emailed. I don't see him here at the moment. But
Hi, Sam. He's there.
there. He's there.
Oh,
Carlos Diaz.
Oh, there you are. Hello. Hi, Carlos.
Hi.
You want to say hi?
Hi. I'm with Alum Rock Business Network, ABN. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you supposed to share anything yet? Not yet, right?
Yeah, I won't stop you if you keep it short, but we do have a packed
Well, we'll
agenda.
do it at the end.
Okay,
Thank you.
sounds good. Thanks, Carlos. I don't see Chris. And if you see someone, please say something. Or Connie. Don't see Danny, Dee, or Elma. Ed, Helen let us know she's not going to be able to make it today. Justin, you want to say hi?
Hello, Justin. Friday SSJ, which is a bicycle advocacy group for East San Jose. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Welcome. Marcos?
Hello, everyone. Marcos Manriquez from Cristo Rey San Jose Jesuit High School.
Thank you very much. Hello. I don't see Matt today. I don't see Ricardo, and I do see Terry. Last but not least, Terry.
Hi, everybody. Terry Christensen with Communiversity.
Cool. Thanks, and welcome to all the CWG members. Next slide, please. So just a quick reminder about upcoming meetings. We're having the CWG meeting in November. The next one will be in February. There's also monthly board of directors meetings. The VTA board of directors, December, January, and February. And Kristen will email out updates regarding other meetings. Next slide, please. So follow up on the interchange. At the end of the last CWG meeting, we had a request for updates on conversations and plans that the City of San Jose DOT, VTA, or Caltrans may have for interchanges in the station area. And we answered during that meeting that these interchanges are outside of the BSV project scope, that ramps were studied as part of the environmental process and no impacts were identified. And so if there are going to be improvements to the ramps, this area will be part of a second project. We have connected with the VTA highway program. They've confirmed that they have no plans for major infrastructure improvements to interchanges at this time. We also connected with Jess in the city, and Jess shared with us that her group does have things in the work for active transportation improvements involving the interchanges in this area. It will likely require coordination with Caltrans, and we expect Jess to be back in February at the next CWG meeting with her group to present on that. Jess, if you want to say a little something, I see you on camera, please do. Also, we are tight on time, so trying to keep things moving.
Yeah, nope, Doug, that was perfect. Thanks very much. Look forward to being back in February.
Cool, thanks, Jess. And then so passing it over to Erica to talk a little bit about the role of the BSV External Affairs team. Erica, over to you.
Thanks. Today, next slide. Just wanted to talk through what our team, who comes to meet with you quarterly, what our role is on the project to make sure that you all have a clear understanding. So our team falls into two major categories: community outreach and stakeholder coordination. And our team is made up of transit planning and engineering professionals. So on the community outreach side, our activities are driven by the construction outreach management plan that we've developed and will implement as mitigation for the project, which we've been talking to you about. That includes the construction education and outreach plan, the construction transportation management plan, and the emergency services coordination plan. So as part of the COMP, the construction outreach management program, our team manages the public communication related to construction. We also support specific program efforts such as the historic building investigation and monitoring program, and lead coordination and facilitation of VTA hosted meetings and other various outreach activities. On the stakeholder side, a major part of our stakeholder coordination is integrating with the design team to incorporate your community feedback into the project design. In addition, stakeholder coordination includes city and agency coordination with adjacent developers, and working through the contract-specific construction transportation management plans, working with the contractors, the cities, the stakeholders, and the community, which is also one of our environmental commitments. Next slide. So I've been working on this project in this role for the past 11 years, and I have my professional engineer's license. And as I mentioned, our main focus is integrating with the team to incorporate a stakeholder feedback. So we engage with the general public and targeted stakeholders such as yourselves, the CWGs, to share project information and collect your feedback, and relay and work with the rest of the VTA's BART Silicon Valley team as we're integrated to incorporate your feedback into the design. I just wanted to be sure that you all were aware kind of what the role we play, and happy to answer any questions before we turn it over to Bernice. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Erica. Bernice, over to you.
Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to give you an update on where we're at with the facilitator. As you know, we've the last few months been looking at bringing on a facilitator per a request by some of the CWG members, and we have been in discussions with potential CWG facilitators. we have identified a potential facilitator, and we are sort of finalizing the scope and the fee of the role that the facilitator will be playing. And so as we finalize that up, we intend to begin the process with the facilitator and kicking that off for the meeting series in 2023. So just wanted to give you an update on that. So we felt like that would be a good time to initiate and commence with the new year and have the new facilitator on, who will be sort of engaging it a little bit more, maybe on the planning side as well. So that's why we're working on that scope. So next slide, please. So our BART delivery organization, the way we deliver this project is we have the VTA team. And as you all know, we have a new program chief, Gary Griggs, who is on, who is from VTA, and then myself and some other VTA employees, and Lucas, who's on this meeting, are VTA employees. And then we work with a group of consultant teams. We have the program management team that is a joint partnership between HNTB and WSP consultants. And then we have our general engineering consultant, which is Mott McDonald, in a partnership with PH Wong. And they are the ones who have been leading and advancing the design to this point and are working very closely now since we've brought on the tunnel and track work contractor in May. They are reviewing all of the designs and working very closely with the tunnel and track work contractor. Work closely. You'll be getting a little more update on the innovations. Doug's going to give you some details. So that has been the effort between the program management team and the contracting team that is currently on board, and the future contracting teams. Right now, the project management team and the engineering consultants, they are working and reviewing the contract packaging and delivery methods, and are getting ready to prepare for the construction management services RFP that we intend to, I believe, put out sometime early in 2023, around the February timeframe. Next. This shows you our delivery organization. As you can see, sort of at the lead is stakeholders such as yourself and our city partners, the general public, VTA and BART. Then we have our program management team. And as I explained, they do the project engineering, the contract management, project controls related to the cost, schedule, and risk reporting. I think I mentioned before that we are going to be doing an updated cost projection sometime also around the February timeframe. And they put together the contract packages. We have that general engineering consultant, and they do the design services. They do design support during construction, reviewing all the designs and making sure that all the plans and specifications are being followed and adhered to. And then we have the construction management team. That's the one that I said we'll be putting the RFP out for in the February timeframe. They're responsible for inspection and testing, project measurement of the progress that the consultants and the contractors are making on the project delivery. And then they're responsible for when we turn over the system over to BART. Next slide, please. This is our schedule for the tunnel and track work. As you know, as I mentioned, we awarded stage 1 for the tunnel and track work contract, which was innovations, programming services, and design services. That was issued in May, and we have been progressing with that. The next big move with this phase 1 will be the procurement of the tunnel boring machine. We will be coming to the board at the December 1st board meeting for the procurement of the tunnel boring machine. And then early in early in the kind of spring, summertime, we'll begin some of the early work packages that will be at the station areas, like preparing the new hall yard and making the preparations for the launch of the tunnel boring machine. And then we'll get into the heavier construction in spring of 2024. So ongoing efforts, we've been working with key partners, including the City of San Jose and City of Santa Clara, on some efforts to enhance the passenger experience and access to and through the stations. We anticipate sharing some of the proposals related to the station refinements at the board meeting in December as well. We have some alternatives that we're going to present at the Dearborn and downtown stations that we have done an analysis on many of the implications of doing those proposed station refinement efforts. And then we've also been working with the city of Santa Clara on a West Side Underground concourse in response to the city requesting some enhanced access from the west side of the Santa Clara station. So there'll be more on all of that out at the December 1st board meeting. We did have a visit from representatives from the Federal Transit Administration headquarters and our local arm of the Federal Transit Administration, which is Region 9. They came out to visit the project along with our program management oversight consultant. That is a requirement in the federal funding programs that we have oversight consultant. They sort of monitor and track, and we have monthly meetings with them of all of our efforts. We did presentations, they did a tour of the alignment, and then we had a meeting where they got update on the project, on cost, including the future effort to do our new schedule and cost projection, as I mentioned, and looking at the risks. Also talked about our continued effort to get a full funding grant agreement. And I think I have a slide that gives a little more detail on that. So I'll wait for that next slide. We also had a visit from infrastructure advisor that toured the Dearborn station. And we gave an update on the BART Phase 1 project, as well as planned improvements at the Dearborn station. They were a former LA mayor appointed by the government to work with state and local and federal officials to maximize access to federal funding across all regions of the state for priority projects, of which the BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 project has been identified as a priority project for the region. Next slide, please. As you know, back in July of 2021, the FTA did a risk assessment and assigned additional risks and cost contingencies to the project that we had previously did a cost estimate at 6.9 billion. And they came back with a 9.1 billion estimate and a 2034 revenue service date. We are, as I mentioned, going to be doing, they based their cost estimate and schedule estimate based on our initial projections, and they did like a probabilistic estimate, adding those things in. So we will be re-baselining our estimate when we do our cost and schedule estimate when we bring the consultant on. So the other aspect related to cost is, as this phase 1 effort with the tunnel and track work contract progresses, before they begin the phase 2, they will give us a cost estimate of the major work for the tunneling. And there are options for an offshoot of that if there is some difference in what the initial cost estimates were. So it gives us sort of a detour option. But that was the benefits of going with progressive design build, because it lets us, VTA as the owner, ensure that we can be maintaining and controlling the cost. Next slide, please. We are going to be putting in an application. I believe today was the first day of applications. We have already been allocated 750 million from the state, but another 1.5 billion from the state surplus has been allocated to projects outside of Southern California. So we are going to be applying and submitting a request for an additional 750 million, making the total state contribution for the BART Silicon Phase 2 project to be 1.5 billion. We will be putting in our application I want to say thank you to those who responded and have provided some support letters. This state funding is a critical piece of the overall funding plan that we are now funding at that higher amount. The federal funds that we are requesting are contingent on us having a complete and fully funded funding plan, of which the additional 750 million will complete. We are not going back to the local residents and voters and taxpayers. We feel like Santa Clara County residents have voted to tax themselves 3 times. So that's why we are going to the state and federal sources for the additional funds. Next slide, please. As you may have tuned in last month at the November board meeting, the APTA peer review committee did a presentation on their analysis, taking all of the previous analysis on single bore, twin bore from the 2017 study, and did a determination that the single bore project is feasible and appropriate for us to pursue and continue with. Both methods were fairly equal in analysis, but the single bore project demonstrated benefits related to less surface impacts, also less risk related to utilities, especially in downtown San Jose. And also significant to the determination was at this point to go back to the twin bore project would really be detrimental and cause significant delay and cost to the project. So it was I feel, good affirmation that we're still moving in the right direction, and we're going to continue to advance the project that we have been advancing, the single bore project. I did give you a little update on the state funding, but as far as the federal funding, we were previously in the federal government's expedited project delivery pilot program. And that word pilot is really important because it was a new program and we were the first project and first agency to enter into that program. And the whole premise of it was to expedite the process, but there was a constraint on the level of federal contribution. It was capped at 25%. So we are now making a request to transition back into the New Starts program. It's the program that we used for the phase 1 project, and it allows us to basically double the federal contribution. So with that, we've already submitted a letter for transferring back. We had started out this project early on through that, and then when the new pilot program came, we moved to that. But now as we're transferring back, we've also requested a letter of no prejudice. And what that is basically it allows us to continue on with the activities like procure the tunnel boring machine, do some of the early construction works while we're waiting to get that full funding grant agreement. And next slide, please. On the innovations, as I mentioned, for about the last 4 months, the tunnel and track work contractor, part of that contract was to really look at innovations that would be enhancing to the project and also maybe more cost effective and actually be a more efficient way to deliver the project. Some of those were related to space proofing. We looked at some alternative ventilation. One of the major ones was looking at side-by-side tracks throughout the entire 6 miles. Previously on the single bore design, we went from side-by-side tracks, and then they did sort of a transition to the stacked tracks at the stations. And then they went back in the BART system. The majority of the system is side-by-side. So going side-by-side is more consistent. It also would include a center platform configuration. Also looking at a different approach at boring, rather than doing a big, large cut and cover at 28th Street Little Portugal station, we would use a tunnel boring machine to basically bore through that station area below ground. And then the actual, what they call cut and cover for the station, will be a much smaller kind of footprint and digging in that area. Also looked over in some of the innovations, just general station layout, access and egress. Kind of a side-by-side. That's why we did the station refinement effort concurrently, because some of these innovations make more feasible some of the station refinements that we're looking at. So next slide, please. These were what we looked at in the innovations. As we are evaluating them, we looked at what were the implications related to future operations, maintenance, and of course, safety, the overall passenger experience, constructability, was it feasible, can we do it? And then what were the implications about improving the cost and schedule? And I think I'm handing it over to Doug now, and you can go over some of the details of where those innovations are. Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, thanks, Bernice. I'm really focusing in on the station refinement for the 20th Street Little Portugal station, just for reiterating a little bit of what Bernice said to give some context. So shown on this slide, these are the three proposed innovations that we shared at the last CWG meeting, right? Bernice mentioned the most important. Well, Bernice mentioned this one, but one of the most important is this larger tunnel allows for the tracks to be built side by side on the entire length of the alignment. It also allows for the mid-tunnel facilities to possibly no longer be needed. But related to the 28th Street station, it also allows for the 28th station to be built largely within the tunnel, which can significantly reduce construction impacts associated with building the station. So as shown on this slide, by building the station largely within the tunnel, the amount of dirt that would need to be excavated and trucked out of the area is significantly reduced. Rather than having to dig and move approximately 3 football fields worth of dirt, the proposed innovation only requires the space in the little red box shown on the image on the right be excavated. So at the last CWG meeting, these are the two options for the station that we showed you that the BSV2 project was considering. And both of these options are much more implementable than the previous design and would have significantly less construction impact. The project team's currently advancing the rectangular shaft option that was shown in the previous slide as the preferred option because it's better for passenger experiences. It's also similar to the previous design with much less construction impact than the previous design. A rendering of the rectangular option will be here on the next slide. And some of the reasons it's better for passenger experiences is it has more direct and legible travel routes, which also contributes to perceptions of faster travel times through the station. It also provides better safety and security by providing more visibility. And it also has better locations for art because art can be located where it can be viewed by people while they ride down the escalator like in the previous design. Next slide, please. And then David, I'll go to you. So this slide shows a rendering of the rectangular shaft option that the project team's currently advancing as the preferred option for the station. The framing concepts for this for the station remain unchanged. The station it still provides direct routes to and from the trains, and the Portuguese design elements that fit and complement the surrounding neighborhood are still slated to be included. And David, I see your hand up, so over to you.
Yeah, how does this affect we've already designed the head house.
Yes.
What's the story now?
The head house, the above ground portion of the station is essentially the same.
Okay, that's good. Good to hear it.
And are there other questions for me or Bernice or comments? Okay, seeing nothing in the chat, seeing no other hands up, and not hearing from anyone, we're going to go over to Ron Gollum, VTA's Director of Real Estate, with some updates on real estate and acquisitions.
Great, thank you, Doug. Boy, this is a lot of information we're putting out here. So I know it's kind of a fire hose, but let me just give you an overview both about real estate and kind of where we stand right now. So, the first slide is just really, the thing to understand about our process is that when the board of directors of VTA adopted the environmental clearance in 2018, and the environmental document analyzed all the alternatives, it identified the properties that are needed for the project, and all the property owners were notified at the time. That provided the legal authority for VTA to acquire the property that's needed to build the project and the specific parcels. And so our process since then, as we've been refining the design, is of course thinking about how we can reduce the number of property and the amount of impacts that are going on. I should also say that at the time the board adopted the environmental document, right after that, we adopted the relocation plan. So that involves sending notices out to all the occupants, residential and commercial, in the parcels that might be needed for the project, and letting them know about the project and the kinds of relocation assistance that they would require. And then the relocation plan is taking that information and really talking about not only all the assistance that people are entitled to, including help finding new spaces, assistance with moving costs, assistance with rent differentials, and so on, but about how we're going to go about doing all of that. And so that was the final relocation plan. And so we have a web page and links at the bottom here for VTA's BART Phase 2 real estate. And if you go to that page, there's 2 documents at the bottom that might be of interest. One is the final relocation plan I just described. The other is with respect to the eminent domain process, because it's something that's very different than I think how most people think about how real estate works. There's a handbook called Your Property, Your Rights, and it's a handbook we give all property owners that explains this process when we start engaging with them. And that handbook's on the website as well. They can give you a kind of a deeper dive on that. And then the final thing I'll note on the site is that, of course, we have a team of real estate agents that have been working with property owners. ARWS is our relocation consultant. So their relocation agents who work for us are working with the occupants of properties that will need to be relocated because of the project. Next slide, please. So, of course, you're all familiar with the project and the stations. If I could have the next slide, please. Just to give you an overview of what the project involves, at this point, there's 85 properties that we need to acquire for the property. Now, that doesn't mean we're buying 85 properties. There's really a combination of different kinds of interests. And actually, some properties have more than one type of interest. So I might need one type of easement, and then maybe we're buying a portion of the property and so on. And that's really for the alignment we had in the prior slide. So just to give you a little bit of a breakdown, the full fee where we buy the entire property is about 9 of the 85 properties, between either temporary easements related to construction or permanent easements about sort of design needs and so on. That's about another 30 of the properties. But the single biggest category of acquisitions is tunnel easements. So where we build in the public right-of-way, primarily along Santa Clara Street or along Stockton Avenue in the alignment, that's per our statutory authority. But where the tunnel takes turns, so when it comes from Berryessa and goes under 101 through 28 to get to Santa Clara, when it comes off the Alameda and takes a swing to go up Stockton, when it leaves Stockton and goes north to get under 880, we're going under private property and we have to acquire tunnel easements from them. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. In terms of where we are, we've made offers for over half the properties that we require, 48. And we've actually already started the appraisal process, which is the first step in acquisition for nearly 3/4 of the property. So we are very much in the peak period right now of acquiring the property that's going to be needed for the project. I will say that, the experience that we've had so far tracks with our experience with the Phase 1 extension to Milpitas in Berryessa, North San Jose. And what we found there, and this is not surprising at all, generally people have ideas and plans for their properties, and we're folks that are disruptive because nobody plans on a transportation project coming along and needing their property. And so a lot of times when we engage with folks, they either won't engage, they kind of hold off or postpone. And so about half the time we have to take the parcels to the VTA board and conduct a resolution of necessity hearing, which is what gives us the legal authority to proceed with the eminent domain process if we need to. We always try to reach negotiation, a mutual agreement with folks, but what the resolution of necessity does is that if we can't reach agreement, or if folks won't agree to sign a possession use agreement, which gives us possession of property for the project, but lets us continue negotiating the interest, then at that point, that's when we have to start pursuing the eminent domain. And just in general, we're pretty much on schedule to acquire the properties we need so that the early works construction can start, starting in the sort of middle-ish part of next year. And then, of course, the heavy construction and tunnel boring in 2024. And then I know the tunnel easement was of particular interest in the Five Wounds area. 12 of the 46 tunnel easements are basically in the area from roughly about 25th Street to 27th, and then up towards the alignment that you've seen in earlier images. And there's also a couple on the other side of 101 as it heads towards Berryessa. So what I have on the screen right now is actually the graphic from the tunnel easement that we purchased from private owners. And I know, depending on your screen, it's a little hard to show. So let me give you a little bit of context here. So the bottom area of the bottom box there that's got the cross hatching, that's what we call is the exclusive tunnel area. And so as you can see, that's about an 80-foot tall area. So although it doesn't look big on the screen, this is a very large area when you're talking about something that's 80 feet tall. And basically the tunnel sits in the center of that. And that's the area where we have to protect, where that area cannot be breached at all to protect the integrity and safety and operation of the tunnel. Now above that, in the sort of diagonal hatching area, which is about 25 feet high, that's an area that we basically talk about kind of, it's not the exclusive tunnel area, but it's a protective zone. So in that case, it's possible to go into that area based on review by BART to ensure that there's no issues for safety or operations, as well as kind of approved by BART, but that's on a case-by-case basis. It's reviewed. Now, on top of that, then that white area that's between the top of the protective zone and the surface is the top line, you know, that's roughly maybe about 15 feet or so. And what that is that if you're digging not any deeper in that area, so you're talking about kind of shallow excavations, that's something that you can do as an owner. And, you know, there's really not any kind of restriction on kind of that level of activity. So let me share a couple thoughts. And I know this has come up in our discussions with you, with the property owners, both in Five Loons area and elsewhere, which is, you know, I'll be the first to say, pretty much nobody is a tunnel engineer. And so this is a lot of new information without really a basis to kind of evaluate it. And I know that when you look at legal agreements, they're written about what you can't do. So sometimes maybe it's helpful to talk about what you can do if there's a tunnel easement under your property. And again, this is sort of general guidance, but I'll start with the basic level, is that when you look at kind of simple structures, so if you're looking at, for example, a new building that's 1 or 2 or perhaps up to 3 stories, that pretty much should be consistent tunnel easement without having to get other approvals besides what the city of San Jose is going to require. You can also dig less than 15 feet down. And you can also kind of do grading and mounding as long as you're not putting more than 10 feet of fill on top of it. Now, the next layer is other things you can do, but it's going to require review and approval from BART and VTA, is that when you want to dig beneath 15 feet, when you want to grade more than 10 feet of soil, or where you want to start going over 3 stories in height, that's going to be a review situation. And then the set of things that you can't do is you cannot dig into the exclusive tunnel area in any scenario. There's a weight restriction, which is that you can't have more than 1,000 pounds per square foot on top of the tunnel. I realize unless you're an architect or engineer, it's hard to evaluate that. But the way to think about that is that generally 3 stories is good. 4 stories might be possible in review if you use lightweight construction. But if you think about putting a mid-rise or high-rise building, those are too tall, too heavy. They need foundation systems that really aren't going to be compatible. And so those are situations where you get into impacts. So, you know, we've been talking to business owners, and again, there's a lot of explanations in here. And I'll also share, which is, as you all know, that especially along kind of the section of Santa Clara Street closest to the station, there's a lot of Vietnamese business owners and folks from other cultures. And so, you know, we've had situations where we've brought in interpreters, you know, Vietnamese speaking staff from VTA to help us in some of the discussions with the owners. And I think we're working with them to help them understand the issues. And as you would expect, you know, neighbors tend to talk, and so there's a lot of discussion, and we're kind of aware of that. You know, I think a lot of the questions that tend to come up is that people think about that potential for future, kind of what does this mean in terms of my doing future stuff in the area? And I'll share some very general thoughts. You know, the first is to understand that when we buy property interests, we have to set just compensation, which means fair market value. By law, we cannot write an offer that's less than fair market value set by appraisal. And our process is not only do we hire one appraiser to do that, but we hire a second appraiser to do a review. And if for properties that are over $1 million, the Federal Transit Administration has to do another review before we do it. And that appraisal is based on the current highest and best use for the property as determined by the appraiser. And highest and best use is really about what's allowed by the current zoning and kind of what's feasible based on kind of market and technical considerations. What it does not include are things like project influence. By project influence, what we mean is, you know, BART, and this is true of other projects like highways, can increase property value. And so if there's a portion of the current value that's increased by the project, by law, we don't pay for that because that's not reasonable to taxpayers. The flip side is that when agencies have projects that decrease property values, the burden of that loss is not put on property owners. That's the agency's issue. The other thing I'll say is that, you know, when you talk about compensation, you know, there is room for debate about what is fair market value, even if you get a couple different appraisers in the mix. And so that's why this is a negotiation process. We present an offer, we start negotiating. And if we can't reach agreement, we need the properties to keep to the project schedule, and that's where a possession use agreement comes in. And if the owner signs that, that takes care of possession, and then we have a lot more time to keep working on negotiations. And the owners always have the option of going to a trial, which is the end stage in the eminent domain process, to have a jury determine what the property is really worth. Going back to the development impact question, looking at the specific area, most of the buildings along Santa Clara Street, and a lot of them are actually in the Roosevelt Park Urban Village Plan, as opposed to the Five Wounds Urban Village Plan. Based on the height restrictions in the plan, we think at most there's maybe about a 1-story impact on future development on the site. But a lot of these parcels are fairly small parcels, and a lot of them, if you look at the dimensions of the parcel, even if the zoning allows a certain height, doesn't mean you can automatically build up to that height. We certainly do have one parcel where somebody's getting planning approvals for a bigger project, kind of a multi-family project, like 5 stories above a podium, and the tunnel's on a corner of that property. That does create impacts, and that's part of the compensation, is to adjust for those kinds of impacts. And so we've been having those discussions and kind of working through that. So I know that's a lot of information, so I'll probably stop there. And I see that David has a question, but I'd be happy to answer your questions or kind of fill in any more detail about kind of what the real estate process is and what we're doing.
Okay, so we're about to open up all 4 urban village plans around the BART state. Mm-hmm. And I anticipate that VTA, as well as the city, will want higher densities, which means higher heights. Right. Are you going to, not you, but is the city going to reflect these properties that now are going to be potentially in between other properties that can go stories higher? And how do you, well, that's one question. Yeah. Are those going to be depicted in the urban village plans as, this parcel can only go 3 stories, this one can go 5, 6, 7, whatever. Then they do it by heights in the urban village plan, not stories. But the other one is, and it sort of slipped my mind. Heights. Aggregation. When a developer wants to aggregate properties, as you said, these are narrow. However, they're narrow and narrow depth and narrow width. So typically a developer would want to aggregate properties, and how does that work to their detriment and to the property owner's detriment as well? Yeah. So those are 2 questions, I guess.
Well, those are great questions. So let me just say, starting out with, when we are buying these tunnel easements, so an easement is a restriction on property, and we're paying people for the right to have that restriction on the property. And that is something that runs with the property. So if you sell a property with an easement, the successor owner is bound to that easement. So it's really a different thing than the city and what they do with planning. I mean, I think your point is that, I think, not to put words in your mouth, but that, when the city does planning, they ought to think about these considerations and incorporate that. And that does make sense. But I just want to be clear that the planning part is really separate from what we're doing to buy properties. Now, I think the other part of what you're getting at is, how does this actually kind of impact properties? And, it's really a site-by-site type of consideration. And so there are some properties where it's under kind of the middle of the property. There aren't many. Most of the properties, it tends to be a corner or a slice. And the thing about development is you can never cover all of your site with a building, because of course the city has things like setback requirements, open space requirements. Again, remember, even if you want to build, say, a 5-story building, well, if the tunnel easement needs to go to 3, you can put 3 over the part of the building that's where the tunnel is, and you can put 5 on the rest of the site. And so, you just have to look at each site. And I think that when you talk about the aggregation scenario, the more property you have, the more flexibility you'll have, because that means the tunnel easement should be a smaller proportion of the property. And certainly where the easement's along an edge or a corner, that tends to be a part of a setback or parking area, becomes a lot easier. It does become more challenging when it's sort of more in the middle. But again, there are a couple of properties that have that situation, but for the most part, there aren't that many that fall in that category. So I don't know if that's helpful, David, but the reality is you just have to kind of look at it on a site-by-site basis.
Thank you, Ron. David, confirming your question is answered. Your questions.
Yeah, for the most part, although let me add a caveat. There's not a lot of, parking is not, parking may be going away, as you all know. So the bulk of these properties will probably be occupied by buildings. And any parking would be under the footprint, in the footprint of that building. So
Right.
I'm looking at other than setbacks to the residential neighborhoods. I don't see a lot of setbacks.
No, you're right. I'm sort of saying it generally. I will say that, my expectation is that you won't see much underground parking just because of both kind of site issues, but also because it's so much more expensive and the economics of development are so challenging that whatever amount of parking there is, and you're right, David, I think the trend is downwards and we want to encourage that because we want people to be walking and biking and not relying on their cars. But, it'll either be on the surface or under buildings, but on grade or in structures of that sort.
Yeah, and that takes away the first floor underground parking, like it happens a lot. And even, a lot of these foundations, they dig fairly deep, even if they don't have parking, but just the foundations themselves and the sub first floor infrastructure will go, a lot of times 10 feet.
I would say this is I think that, again, these are general statements. So, you have to look at each site specifically, but, generally you could do one level of underground parking. Now, if you want to get to 2 levels or even 3 levels, that's right. Now you're going to be in a situation where you have to kind of apply to BART and VTA and have a review and kind of show that this design will not compromise the safety and the integrity of the tunnel. And there's a process to do that. I think, and I'm not as clear on this area, but I know when we looked at this in other places like downtown, the water table is such that people rarely go down more than 2 levels because it just gets so expensive, not only to dig, but to dewater the sites and deal with all of those issues. Where you run into issues is a lot of buildings, up to the point where you're kind of, 3-4 stories, they're more of a mat foundation. And so you're right, there's depth, but I think it works within this framework. When you start getting taller and you have to drive piles and tunnels don't mix. And so trying to drive a pile through an area on top of a tunnel, that's not going to work. And that will be a constraint. And so, but again, the tunnel alignment and the tunnel easements only occupies a certain kind of discrete location within the area. So there's plenty of sites in the area that will not be affected by this at all.
Yeah, you may not be able to pile drive, but you could drill and pour piles. So that's another.
Depending on depth and so on, yeah.
We're getting into the weeds now, so thanks.
We're also running up on time. It's a jam-packed agenda. We are drinking from the fire hose. Thank you for the the detailed information, Ron, the good conversation. And it is kind of wonky, but I think a helpful clarification for folks is the parking minimum requirements are going away. I know parking is an important issue in this area. So it's not necessarily parking's going away. The requirements for parking minimums are expected to go away. And I believe you can confirm that, Ron.
Yes. And so the minimums go away, but remember, the developers and their tenants and the lenders, they all have their ideas about what's the minimum amount of parking you still need. So parking minimums means the city doesn't have requirements, but that doesn't mean parking itself is entirely going away.
Thank you for that clarification. And we're officially at time. So I'm going to move us on to the next topic, which is we're still on real estate, but moving over to the TOD group and Ron's group with Christina Gotuaco and Roy Mann talking about some of the planning efforts. There's many that are all under one umbrella. David alluded to it a little bit earlier that there's a few urban village plans opening up, but there's a comprehensive effort to plan around the 23rd Little Portugal Station, the Five Wounds urban village area being the largest urban village area, but it also touches other urban villages. There's some conversation about the naming convention that I'll let Christina and Roy get into as they see appropriate. And Christina and Roy, over to you.
Okay, I will start with this first slide. First of all, I guess apologies for Charla Gomez. You mentioned, Doug, there's a comprehensive planning effort underway. Charla is away or out of the office right now. And so we're presenting this slide really on city behalf. They've done a magnificent job of working with a number of different consultant groups with varying types of stakeholder and neighborhood and community engagement. Here's the scope. You can see in the first bullet, The study area is consistent with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission's recent transit-oriented community policy within a half-mile radius. And each of these 4 station areas that are bolded, as you mentioned, and as our CWG chair observed, are going to become one station area plan eventually. So next slide, please. The design development framework is another effort that's underway that's more specific to the VTA owned properties. The concept is to help guide developers that will evaluate proposals and deliver something that benefits the neighborhood, that's consistent with all of the many kind of planning activities that have already taken place, including, just to mention a couple of in the last bullet there, the En Movimiento plan. A Communiversity actually isn't here, but it probably is worth noting. And you can see in red there the subject properties that are going to be part, or that are part of this design development framework activity. Next slide, please. And Christina.
Thanks, Roy. So just kind of zooming out from VTA's perspective, where this whole DDF initiative fits in, and the DDF is a subsector of the full 5 Wounds Urban Village Plan update. On our side at VTA, we have a transit-oriented communities policy where we are trying to encourage ridership, grow ridership through increased density by all of our various train stations, light rail stations, and to really build in this vibrant, mixed use, mixed income community that others kind of invest in to create these thriving transit-oriented communities. And so I think most of you are familiar with the 2019 playbook that detailed out the strategies around the 28th Street Little Portugal station area. And the top 6 strategies are noted on this slide, and they are kind of they are helping to inform the city's work on the 5 Wounds Urban Village Plan updates, as well as the DDF that VTA is doing. So VTA was present at the 5 Wounds kickoff in September. It happened mid-month, and we heard from some of the community leaders that are part of this group. We all went on a site walk and visited a few spots. So the first spot was the Portuguese National Parish, where we heard from Terry, David, and Matt Gustafson from Somos Mayfair on different aspects of the history of this site, as well as the Communiversity plan and the demographics of the area in the present day. And so just a thank you to those organizations. And then we had additional speakers and attendees from the City of San Jose and VTA's various departments that are all interrelated on the DDF and the 5 Wounds planning efforts. So there were people from the City Transportation Department, Housing, Office of Economic Development, Parks and Planning, as well as people from the VSV team here today. And then VTA's real estate transit-oriented development teams and planning. So these are just going to be a few images from the tour where we started off across the highway and crossed over one of the overpasses on East Santa Clara towards approaching the station from the east. The group had some presentations from the departments, as I mentioned, stopping at the corner of North 28th Street and 5 Wounds. So Cristo Rey is to our Cristo Rey High School is to our left in this picture, and then the future BART plaza and entrance is to our right past this green fencing. And then we kind of went up to Julian and then looped back around on 27th Street and paused here at 27th and East St. James to have more of a conversation about displacement pressures and anti-displacement measures that will be part of this effort. And then we all regrouped back at Cristo Rey High School and did a round of final reflections among the consulting teams that were being oriented to this project and the local community organizations and city staff and VTA staff. So on this slide and the next, there's kind of just a summary of what was heard on that day, things that people voiced in terms of challenges or experience just along the sidewalk, but there are definitely mentions of concerns about displacement, and which is why the city was heavily prioritizing focusing on both small business anti-displacement and resident anti-displacement in this planning effort. Notes about overcrowded housing and multiple households living in single family homes, reliance on private vehicles, whether because of the nature of people's employment or due to the lack of transit connectivity needed to be less auto dependent. Freeway noise was a notable issue as well. And then just a general disconnect from other parks and trails, and that the 5 Wounds Trail can really be this connectivity point once it's built out in this area. And then just also noting the preservation and the importance of historical sites. And so on the flip side, there were also some opportunities mentioned. So for example, buffering the freeway noise with new developments and other treatments, the 5 Wounds Trail, as I mentioned, and this neighborhood just having an inspiring history and a passion and creativity that is not seen in as many other neighborhoods, or well, this is where it feels the strongest to some people who are on the sidewalk. And then also with the BART station coming in, the new opportunities for multimodal transportation, bike and ped infrastructure, as well as the routes that VTA will be changing slightly around the station to provide better access. And then just the opportunity with given the space for more people-friendly design focused in this around the station area. And then so here we just have a summary of some of the words we heard from the community-based organizations. Some of these were on the previous slides, but also we heard from David. Good to know what you didn't know, which is why it was a very helpful exercise for everyone to be there going on this exact same site walk, seeing the circulation issues, seeing, hearing the noise, and knowing firsthand, especially since the teams are kind of coming from a variety of different locations. And a word from Terry, listen to the community and don't harm.
So in terms of what's next, some community workshops coming up on December 8th at the Roosevelt Community Center. They're having an in-person gathering to identify opportunities and constraints. You can see some of the other activities coming up in the new year and through next summer and autumn of 2023. One question that, well, I should say, the one coming up next month, in less than a month, it is going to be at the Roosevelt Community Center. One of the things that I know Charla Gomez really wanted to make sure she honored was a common interest in having an in-person gathering. And we're doing our best to coordinate things like hybrid and translation services and so on and so forth. I think it would be helpful, perhaps if time permits, to hear from members of this community working group, any thoughts or preferences as it relates to in-person versus hybrid or all virtual, as we're like we're doing today. That's what we have for well, in addition to this one, other ways to stay involved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roy and Christina. If there's preferences for person or virtual, I think you could drop it in the chat. You can send that to Christina or Roy, great, even individually here, or using their emails that are on the slide here, or we can also put you in touch with them. I also want to be sure, sometimes I mishear things. I don't know if I did, but I want to be sure that we know that we know Terry's here, and Terry is with the Communiversity. Just making sure that's clear. I think that was said, but it might not have been. Just want to make sure folks know that. And then also opening up the floor for questions and comments for Roy and Christina.
Yeah, in getting in-person community involvement, what we found many years ago during when we were creating or eliciting the community input for the BART Station Area Community Concept Plan, we did meetings on weekends when neighborhood residents and community members would be perhaps more able to attend. And also we have a community here. I can speak to the Portuguese community, but I can also speak to others who are not tech savvy. So a hybrid doesn't work so great. And in person on a Thursday night, maybe not so great either, just because of participation. And maybe a Saturday morning is better, which is what we did those many years ago when we were putting together our plan.
Thank you, David.
Any other questions or comments for Roy or Christina?
I'll just add to the question that it's also in terms of members of your communities and your networks, does it feel like doing an in-person only would miss out on having greater participation? Or, I mean, like right now our teams are working on trying to figure out how to best do a hybrid. But if the choice is between all in person versus all online, I guess, David, you're saying there's a lot of low tech. So it's just in person is very important. And I guess my ask is how extra important is having the hybrid option, not just an in-person. So we will have a recording of the first community meeting that will be posted online, which is probably not going to be the same as attending in person. But and then also it will be connected with an online survey so that people can still provide input who aren't necessarily able to attend live. But I think it's helpful for the future, the project team and the future for the upcoming other 4 community meetings to just see the value of like, would hybrid be valuable?
A hybrid could be valuable. Another consideration, I mean, it's another option, I mean, basically.
Yeah.
But also, instead of having people come to you for your event, why don't you go to their events? For instance, I know that there will be a holiday event at Roosevelt Community Center in December. You could table there, for instance. I don't know when it is or the details more than that, but there's a holiday event. And anyway, it's just another thought to elicit the feedback you want. Don't just hold come to us, but you go to them too when you have a larger type of event.
Yeah, actually, quick question to Kristen. Are you going to be doing that same Mentimeter poll of like, where should we show up?
Yes.
That's to come. Okay, great. Then I'll hold my thought. And Terry?
Yeah, I just want to second what David said. I'm a strong proponent of in-person meetings. It's a whole other kind of meeting where you interact with people. We can break down into small groups. It's different from doing that by Zoom. An in-person meeting really involves the community interacting and engaging. And particularly if we want people to come back to a second or third or fourth meeting, it's important that that first meeting give people the real sense that they're having a say in what the future will be. Having said that, I'm a little nervous about whether people will come to in-person meetings anymore. I think we're really going to have to rally the troops to just get people to show up. So we need to definitely hold the alternative of online meetings in reserve, if not for the first meeting, then for subsequent meetings. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And thank you, Roy and Christina. I have to move us along in the interest of time. I think we're going to already go over a little bit today. And there might be some follow-up conversation to be had with David and Terry on this topic. We're going to move on to the station refinement update for the downtown and Diridon stations with Adriano. Adriano, you are up.
All right, thank you, Doug. Hi, everyone. As a reminder, the BSV program has taken on a station design refinement effort that was based on the direction provided by the VTA board in May of this year. And that was to specifically look for opportunities to improve connectivity, access, passenger experience, circulation, and TOD integration for the downtown and the Diridon station. The guidelines provided were to see what kind of improvements and refinements could be conducted and included within the project, or what accommodations could be made to allow the project to move forward with its current schedule for full funding grant agreement, while still allowing for those future refinements to occur. So the effort kicked off in early June and included 7 collaborative workshops with VTA, BART, and the city of San Jose. In mid-September last year, we were here to present just an overview of the outcome of the initial concept development effort and Tier 1 evaluation, which really focused on passenger experience and urban design. Since then, we've continued to advance the preferred concepts with the goal of being able to develop an implementation assessment and look at cost, schedule, construction impacts, things like that. And so we've been working to develop draft recommendations. That's where we are today. That we just had some of the implementation assessment key pieces come in late last week. So we're still very much in the middle of all of that, but are working towards a presentation to the VTA Board of Directors on December 1st. So as a reminder on the overall process, we brought various evaluation criteria to the CWGs and to the larger community to get a sense of what are some of the elements that are most important to the community. Based on that, we conducted a passenger experience and urban design evaluation with the City of San Jose, BART staff, and SPUR, and have since advanced the concepts enough to be able to conduct a technical and feasibility analysis. So that's really where we're on the tail end of that third step right now, trying to figure out what our next recommendation will be. So just a brief overview of, or a reminder of what we are looking at specifically for the downtown. We're really looking to reduce the number of escalator switchbacks. I should note that since the effort started, the tunneling contractor did propose an innovation for a center platform tunnel, and that allows for even further improvement to the vertical circulation in the downtown and Diridon stations. So at the downtown, the key focus was looking to reduce the number of escalator switchbacks, and then additionally what opportunities there may be for increased TOD above the station head house and what opportunities there might be for TOD at the ground floor. So the biggest change that we've done in the downtown is that the concept rotates the escalators from an east-west orientation to north-south, and we have a rectangular longer excavation that really allows us to limit the number of switchback to the one switchback that is on that first level below ground. And as you can imagine, as you can see here, the innovation of the tunnel, proposed tunnel innovation would really eliminate the need for that additional run going all the way to the lower level. Additional things that are being considered are the ability to provide structural support for on-site TOD. Just as a reminder, transit-oriented development is not a part of the federally funded project. But with that said, we are including an option for TOD support and structural support to accommodate that. We're also looking at opportunities for ground floor retail space. That was one of the desires that we heard from the community, and whether a free passageway between Santa Clara Street and the new Paseo on the DDF block could be provided. So those are still elements under consideration. Additionally, for the downtown station, there's been a lot of desire for a station to the south of Santa Clara Street. The proposed tunnel innovations with a center platform do really facilitate that connection. We have continued to talk with the FTA and the city of San Jose to determine the feasibility of using a historic property on the south side, and are still in conversations with that. At Diridon, the primary focus is to really look at opportunities for integrating the station with the future disc concourse, the northern concourse, and also what opportunities there might be for high density TOD on the site. The refinements also look at a rectangular excavation to really try and minimize the footprint of the downtown station. So we're looking at a couple different concepts that can do that, and looking at some back of house redesign as well to try and really optimize the opportunity for transit oriented development. Whether it be facing Post Street as shown here, or potentially facing Montgomery. And then additionally, we have looked at the feasibility of the second entrance at Diridon. This would be located west of the existing railroad tracks, so just east of White Street. We have a vent and emergency egress facility there already, and so have been coordinating with the property owners, so that's JPB, Caltrain, and with High Speed Rail to make sure that a future entrance there could be included and wouldn't preclude or conflict with any of their current plans. So next steps. As I mentioned, we've really just finished the implementation assessment. We're reviewing cost estimates that have come through for that, and are starting to put together our recommendations. So we will be starting to share findings later this week, early next week, and we'll really be presenting the recommendations to the VTA Board of Directors on December 1st. So if you're interested in the outcome of this effort, I encourage you to tune into that meeting. And we will follow up with a blog post in December as well.
Cool. Thanks, Adriano. Bill, I see have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, will people be able to get access to the stations from both sides of Santa Clara?
That is something that is still being considered. We are looking at the opportunities for a full second entrance on the south side, as well as whether a sidewalk style entrance would be appropriate. That final decision hasn't been made, but that is still being studied, and I think at minimum we would include accommodations for that connection to be made in the future.
I think it's a really important aspect of both stations, both Diridon and downtown, to be able to gain access to the station from both sides. So thank you.
Understood. Thank you, Bill.
Are there other questions or comments for Adriano? Okay, and knowing we're tight on time, seeing no hands, seeing nothing in the chat, not hearing anyone, we're gonna move on to the outreach and engagement update with Erica and Kristen. Erica, I think you're up first, so please take it away.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, VTA has developed and will implement the construction outreach management program to meet our environmental commitments. The purpose of the comp is to minimize and reduce construction related impacts to the extent feasible on the community and inform the public and other stakeholders of the construction schedule and associated activities. We've talked about this numerous times here, the various plans here in the CWG meeting. Next slide. Wanted to do a quick deeper dive as we have an update on the construction transportation management plan. So the purpose, to reiterate here, the purpose of the CTMP, Construction Transportation Management Plan, is to minimize and reduce to the extent feasible construction related transportation impacts to all modes during construction. So the plan will, we have the draft plan thus far, and once the contractors are on board, of which the first contractor is on board, we'll be developing contract-specific CTMPs, but the contract-specific CTMPs will identify construction details which will create disruptions based on selected means and methods. We'll identify how and when to communicate the disruptions to the stakeholders in the community, and we'll work in hand with the construction education and outreach plan to communicate as such. The plan will also be used, go back a slide, thanks, used to establish the baseline for developing the traffic control plans as they're needed. The CTMP will not impede construction to eliminate travel and access disruptions or eliminate the construction related impacts overall on the project. Next slide. As we've talked about previously, and have presented on the draft plan, we are now engaging on the development of the first CP2, the contract package 2, where Hewitt-Shea Trailer Joint Venture is the contractor for that first tunnel and track work contract. We're starting the development of that specific, the first specific CTMP. And so I wanted to touch here again on what the engagement process is related to that. We will have regular coordination meetings between KST, the contractor, VTA, and the city. We had our kickoff meetings with both cities this week for this first effort. In addition, we'll have regular coordination meetings with adjacent businesses and institutions throughout the development to provide input. And we'll be hosting public meeting or multiple meetings depending on the extent of the CTMP to give the community an opportunity to provide input on the draft. Next slide. So the first CP2 specific CTMP will be for early works at the west portal only, which is denoted as the number 1 on the graphic, which is where the tunnel boring machine will eventually launch to start the tunnel. And so the CTMP will cover, preparing the VTA's owned new haul yard property with site grading and preparing the supportive excavation for the tunnel boring machine to be assembled and then eventually launched. So we know based on initial conversations as KST is starting to advance their design and development that there will be a second CTMP for the early works for the remaining project areas. So Diridon, downtown, 28th Street, and the East Portal. That will be kicking off as they want to start that work in summer of 23. And the intent is that they'll start the work at the West Portal in the spring of 23. So we know that we'll be engaging with you all on that as well as this first one. And we'll know there will be additional CTMPs for the major construction down the line. But just wanted to give you all an update today that we have started the process and we'll be in touch with you with more information as it is available. Any questions on that before I turn it over to Kristen to talk through the engagement summary? All right, stay tuned.
All right, and just wanted to give you all a brief summary of our 2022 engagement efforts. So from June until October this past year, we had the opportunity to engage at different tabling events, a total of 14 different events, including our community social. And we were able to engage around 1,400 people. And specifically within the 28th Street Little Portugal area, we did attend 4 different events. So thank you to those of you who also provided feedback as to which events we should attend. We're always open to hearing your feedback and hearing which events we should get plugged into and get on the grounds at. So specifically in the past few months, we had the opportunity to take part in VTA de Portugal in June, the Mexican Heritage Plaza Mercadito in July, and also the Chile Mole Pozole in September, and the Alum Rock Farmers Market in October. And so we wanted to take the chance to engage with you folks and get a sense of any further events that we should also be participating in the coming year and beyond, and also other community organizations and agencies or groups that we should be engaging further. So if you have a device, whether your phone or your laptop, if you could either scan this QR code or go to Mentimeter, www.menti.com, and use this code. We can go over there and I will switch screens and switch to Mentimeter. And then I can also share this link in the chat. And so our first question, again, what are other public engagement events that we should be participating in, not just limited to the 28th Street Little Portugal area, but even along the alignment or beyond? We're open to all suggestions that you have for us. And again, if you have any issues connecting to Mentimeter, also feel free to raise your hand and share it verbally, or also enter it in our Zoom chat as well. So I'll give some time for some feedback and wait for it to settle out. So Justin, just to answer your question, I would say anywhere within the South Bay, I think is a great option, but preferably within a quarter mile of the alignment or the project area, but we're open to all. We'll look into it all. And also too, if you have different events that kind of come on your radar throughout the year, feel free to email me as well. And we can also get that on our radar and look into it as well. So it's not just limited to this poll or this meeting by any means. And again, Justin, to answer your question on Christmas in the park, we won't be attending, but we can definitely look into that for future years. All right, and just given the time, I'm going to move us along to the next question, but feel free to continue answering either or of these questions in our Zoom chat as well. So our next question is, what are other community organizations, agencies, associations, etc., that we should be engaging? And again, the same applies. So preferably within our alignment area or station areas, but not limited to that. All right, well, given the interest of time, we will leave the chat open for answering this question. But again, feel free to email me if you have any ideas of events or communities and groups that we should be engaging with and at. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it back to Doug and share my screen again back to our slides.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. And we did have a jam-packed agenda today, but this is a very important part of the meeting that we usually try to get through other things quickly to reserve time for. I'm going to hang out. If folks have a hard stop at 5:30, I understand. But this is the CWG member report back portion of the meeting where it's open forum for the CWG members. Now, from our perspective, we do want to hear what you've been sharing with your communities about the BSV2 project and what you've been hearing back, so we can be aware of the conversations that are out there in the community, so we can appropriately address them and successfully deliver this project together so that we have information to share to that end. We definitely want to hear it. But if you have other things you want to share with the group, this is also your time and your forum. So CWG members, if you have something you'd like to say, please do. Your hand's up, I can call on you. You can put things in the chat or just chime in as you're comfortable. And Carlos, I remember you said you had something to say at the beginning, and I saw you come off mute. So Carlos, why don't you go first?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I think things are generally in like a positive lull right now, kind of like the calm before whatever's going to happen. So I think the word's pretty well out. I think that the project is coming. So I think a lot of folks are familiar with it. It's just the apprehension of how it's really going to get rolled out and what the outcomes are going to be. I think just south of 101 between there and King Road, where my business is located, I think we're looking at doing a little more culturally or to identify our corridor. So there's a group that's formed, being led by School of Arts and Culture, to engage in this identity for this new district or culture that cultural corridor that we want to help to identify our area better. And I think that's about it. I think the project will be here before we know it. But I don't think, I think once it actually, people see more of the construction starting, then it's really, gonna hit them. But I think right now people are just in kind of cruise control. That's all.
Thank you, Carlos. That's helpful to understand. That's useful information for a number of efforts for us to know that that's going on. So thank you for sharing. Terry.
Yeah, just to affirm what Carlos is saying about the School of Arts and Culture and the concept of the new arts district. It's going to be a lot more than an arts district because they've got housing planned, they've got commercial and retail property planned. It's pretty big. So maybe we need to think about asking somebody from the School of Arts and Culture to sit on the community working group, but definitely there needs to be significant outreach to them. Chris Esparza is the person who's their development director, the community development director. So it's really important to get to them. And then I'll just pass on a couple of things I've heard from community. There's still grumbling about the single tunnel versus the double bore. You won't be surprised to hear. And I had a couple people ask me about entrances, plural, to the station at Little Portugal. As far as I know, it's one big wide entrance on one side. And some people have said, well, why isn't there an entrance maybe in the back closer to the parking lot? So just passing that on.
Thanks for passing that along, Terry.
Yeah, I had to clarify with the Portuguese band of San Jose that their building is not protected and will not be acquired by VTA for the BART project. So still clarifying really interesting questions out here.
And thank you for doing that. Any other CWG members have things to share with the group?
Actually, I think the confusion is when they look at the urban village plan, they see the orange border and they think that that's all susceptible to acquisition by VTA. And that's in the city plan. I don't know how to clarify it in the city plan because that's the city's, not yours, not VTA's. But I think they're getting confused with the border of the entire Five Wounds Urban Village plan as to that being acquirable, if that's such a word, by VTA.
And then I think that's helpful to understand. And Ron, I think that might be a place for you to chime in if there's material that VTA has put out or can put out regarding which projects are could possibly acquirable by VTA.
Yeah, I think, the only thing that occurs to me, and this might be a follow-up, and I'll throw this out to Adriana and the folks on engagement team, but there were maps from the environmental document, and maybe we just go back and reference that document in the map so people can understand what was cleared in VTA's plan. Not that we necessarily acquire all those interests, but that's really the right way to begin to think about how did the project start in terms of its property needs. And David, as you pointed out, it is not the city's plan. The city's plan is trying to address other needs.
I think Erica or Krista might be able to answer if we've already developed out public facing materials with that content in it, or if it's something we can consider in future efforts.
Maybe we can circle back on it and confirm.
Yep.
And then I'll add one more. Yeah, I think at least from our communities, from our families, the feedback is less about like how the construction will kind of take place, but more of like how it's going to directly affect us, or like right in front of it, right? As far as kind of safety, transportation, and just like the impacts of what the construction will bring to us, noise, and kind of just affecting our daily learning, and then also kind of the drop-off times, right? It's already a packed street when parents trying to drop off their kids in front of our school and when they pick them up. So like the impact of construction happening right in front of us. And I think that's what's more concerning, right? Our families that are coming off the freeways just because we're so close to it, the impact of how that will also affect, families and anyone that's trying to get to the BART station. I think it's more of a calm as far as kind of like the construction plans and layouts, and more of like, okay, when is this really going to start taking place? And so like then we could start kind of planning and kind of alerting our families as to what to expect.
Well, it's a bigger problem than that, Marcos, in that you're going to be losing the loop around. So right now you encourage the parents not to do a U-turn because it's terrible. You encourage them to do the loop around. So VTA and the City of San Jose and Cristo Rey really need to sit down and try to figure out how a stream of cars twice a day are going to access the school property.
Yeah, because right now they only are able to, well, people still drop them off from the opposite side, right? But they get dropped off mainly on the side closer to us, and there's not really a sidewalk on the opposite side right now. And so, yes, unfortunately, we get people that still do the illegal U-turns, and so that's something to also consider as we get closer. That entire Five Wounds set line is a big pain point for us.
We heard similar things during the downtown Diridon CWG last night. As construction get closer, what's the plan to plan for things through construction? Erica touched on the construction education outreach plan and the CTMP, which we definitely expect to be in the work plan for next year. So we can talk more about in February. And Erica, if you want to add to that, please do.
Yeah, I was just going to say that as we start to work on the construction transportation management plans for the 28th Street area, we'll definitely be reaching out to you directly, Marcos, to have close coordination through that process with the school, for sure.
Anything else from any of the CWG members? Hearing nothing from CWG members, seeing no hands up, seeing nothing in the chat. Anything from anyone else? Okay, great. So we'll wrap up the meeting with, we'll see you again in February. Thank you for participating in this quarter's, the November CWG for this station. So the next meeting in February, we expect to have another phase 2 update. there's the 2023 CWG work plan review that I mentioned, which, construction, education, outreach plan, and the construction transportation management plan. We expect to be a big part of that, like Erica described. We'll also have the, not shown there, we'll have the city back talking about some of their plans for improvements, interfacing with the interchanges in the station area, and then always time, for the CWG member report back. So thank you very much, everyone, for your participation today. And otherwise, in relationship to this project and everything else in the community, we will see you in February. Have a great Thanksgiving if we don't see you sooner. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug.
Bye all. Happy holidays.
Bye all.